Why is there such a difference sometimes then? Some people finding it much harder than others to get to sleep.
So there's lots of different reasons. It's partly a genetic lottery. So there are thousands of different genes which influence how easily we do or don't fall asleep. So it's partly kind of the hand you're dealt when you're born. It's also down to feeling safe. So if you don't feel safe in that moment, it's really hard to fall asleep. So if you imagine trying to fall asleep with your front door wide open, that would be hard, right? But it's also down to how safe you felt as a child. Some research shows that if you felt unsafe or were neglected as a child, you can become wired to be super alert, which is a really useful adaptation if you're growing up in an unsafe environment. But when you're older, you're safe, you're tired and you just want to sleep well, it's not so helpful. And it's also down to our mental health. You know, if you're more anxious, if you've got sort of more racing thoughts, that's also been shown to keep you up at night.
All right, well, we've been finding out what happens to the body when we don't get enough sleep. Jonathan Tam is a sleep doctor, an expert. He sent us this. Let's have a listen.
You don't sleep during the night, you can't process the things you've done during the day. You can't lay down the memories of the new things that you've done, and you may be more affected by any traumatic experiences that have happened. We know sleep is important for our immune system, so if you don't get it, you may not be able to throw off those pesky colds as easily, and you may not respond to vaccines as well. During the day, toxins can build up in our brain. These are removed during sleep, and there's some evidence to suggest that if they're not, we may be more at risk for conditions like Alzheimer's disease later in life. Quite apart from all of this, your brain knows just how important sleep is, and if you don't get it one night, then the next day it will make you feel exhausted to encourage you to get more.
Do you have any advice for getting a good night's sleep? What's helped you?
Ooh, there's so many different things you can do. I guess it's worth working out what it is that's stopping you from falling asleep. So it could be your environment, which is great if you can change it. So you want to be in a dark room. So if you're not in a dark room, get an eye mask like me. You want to be in a quiet space. If it's not quiet, I would recommend using earplugs. You want it to be a good temperature, so about 19 degrees, which I know is really hard if you're somewhere where it's hot and it's summer. I'm struggling with that at the moment. So I'm using a fan and leaving my window open. But with that comes extra noise. So it's difficult. If you're someone who's kept up by anxiety and racing thoughts, it's a good idea to try and do something before bed that will distract you from those. So the sort of research shows that, you know, doing things like reading a book that takes you into another world or chatting to a friend or something like that could really help. And then not doing things like drinking caffeine, that can make a huge difference. So caffeine is incredible. It blocks the receptors in our brains for adenosine, which is the chemical I mentioned before that sort of builds up and makes us feel tired. So it can really help if you're feeling sort of symptoms of sleepiness, but then it can stop you falling asleep later. So avoiding things like caffeine, avoiding alcohol, which also disrupts your duration and quality of sleep as well.
Okay, well, let's bring in the expert on this. We've got some sleep tips for you all. You heard from Jonathan Tam, the sleep doctor, a little bit earlier. Let's bring him back and see what his tips are.
We can help sleep by trying to help our body clock. You can do that by getting up at roughly the same time every day and seeking light when you do, but avoiding it later into the evenings. You can also get into trouble if you spend a lot of time in bed awake, at which point you might start to associate your bed, bedroom, even the act of trying to sleep with wakefulness. So if you are having trouble with your sleep, it's important only to go to bed when you start feeling sleepy, to not have a rigid bedtime. And if you do find yourself lying in bed awake for long periods, then simply get up, go somewhere else and do something else until you feel sleepy. If you're choosing to do other things in the bedroom, like reading, watching television, even working, try and take those things somewhere else and save the bedroom for sleep and intimacy with partners. But through all of this, it's important to recognise that sleep isn't something you can try to do. It's something that comes to you, and if it doesn't, well, sometimes you just have to give yourself a bit of slack and let it come to you. Now, a couple of bad nights here and there are part of life, but if you find yourself sleeping badly for more than 3 months, it's definitely time to see a doctor.